It has happened. It was only a matter of time. I probably could have predicted it if I sat back and thought about it. We have been coddled and enticed. We have been offended and rebuffed. We have laid blame and we have pointed fingers. The past 4 years of incendiary rhetoric, which was based on previous years of division, only softened us for the community fractures which would be caused during another round of conflict between Israel and Hamas or Hezbollah. It has happened. Hamas is dividing us. I may be naive, but I do not believe this is a fight with the Palestinian people who want Israel and Palestine to coexist. For those people, that is not who we're fighting. This is a fight with those who actually work to destroy Israel, even at the knowing death of their own people. Quote, "Blood along the road to Jerusalem," a Hamas spokesman said this week. That's how he discounted the deaths in Gaza. And Hamas rules Gaza with an iron fist, embedding its soldiers and munitions in tunnels throughout the civilian population. But today's talk is not about the rights and wrongs of Israel and Hamas terrorists. Today is a brief reflection on how we at Bethel can have painful conversations, complicated, hard conversations within the safety of our community. These 11 days of war felt different in some ways. It is not Hamas. Hamas has always been doing the same thing that they've always set out to. They are very clear on what their objections are and what their goals are. They want Israel destroyed. They're not seeking peace. The protests of Israeli Arabs, though, has been more pronounced. It is part of a different tone or feeling. And the struggle of American liberal Jews, of which I count myself a part, has also felt more pronounced. People have bought into the simplistic idea of either you love Israel or you love the Palestinians. And I reject that binary and simplistic formula. I love Israel. I have compassion for Palestinians, and I hate Hamas. I think this more closely articulates the moral struggle that we have. Hamas rules Gaza, but it is not the spokesman for the Palestinian people as a whole. Hamas's clear mission is to destroy Israel from the river to the sea, they say. And this means from the Jordan River to the Mediterranean Sea. No Israel will exist. Hashtags to the sea or other similar phrases are not pro-Palestinian. They are hateful messages calling for the destruction of Israel. And yet, in the discourse of Facebook and social media, hashtags rule the moment rather than reflective consideration. So what are the values that I want to uplift here at Bethel as we struggle together, as we stand with love and compassion? I am standing under this tapestry of wrestling. I didn't know that she was going to be here today, but this beautiful tapestry was created by Bethel member Tamar Fishman, who happens to be sitting in the back with her husband. This depicts Jacob's wrestling with an angel from Genesis 32. Commentators ask who the angel was, and the text just says that it's an ish, a man. Some say Jacob was wrestling with himself, his own internal struggle. As he is renamed Yisrael, the internal struggle of Jacob is also accurately called Jacob struggling with Israel. He's struggling with himself. So as we struggle with ourself, within our own sense of peoplehood, we also are struggling and wrestling in this, maybe in the same way that Jacob or Israel is. We are not alone or unique in this moment of struggle. I want to quickly list 4 values I think are essential for us to lean into as a community. These are not arguments to convince anyone. These are values to shape our conversations. The first is from Leviticus 19, "Ve'ahavta l'recha kamocha," that as we engage with each other in difficult conversations, we must love our neighbor as ourselves. As we approach each other with love in difficult conversations, it will allow us to pause to hear what the other person is saying, to see the other person not as a kook, a crazy, someone not worth considering. We've tried that approach in the political theater of America. It has not moved us to productive places. But to see each other, even with disagreement, as someone that is worthy of love is a value that we must lift up, not points to be scored or vitriol over disagreement. The second is anava, of humility. You know what? Maybe I have something to learn. Maybe I can hear something, a different perspective that I hadn't thought about, a sensitivity that I hadn't been made aware of, and I can learn, but that requires humility in the discussion. We don't have enough of that. A third is Ahavat Yisrael, a love of Israel that does not have to be compromised. It does not have to be quieted. We can be proud as we stand with Israel. We are struggling to articulate our feelings. We are angry and we are scared and so many other things, but we love Israel. And so we can have a conversation as a community about how we do that. That's an opening. That's not the end of the conversation of what it means to love Israel. And the fourth value is simply B'Tselem Elohim, that we are created in the image of God. Both the fellow member of Bethel, who you might be in disagreement with, as well as Israelis and Palestinians, are B'Tselem Elohim. And so what does that mean for how we approach each other? What does that mean when someone is attacking you? And how do you respond to them while recognizing B'Tselem Elohim? There is a humanity on all sides, and we must never forget that. We must never diminish our arguments, never diminish how we respond by forgetting the humanity of ourselves and of others. Love your neighbor, humility, love of Israel, and being created in the image of God. These are values that I think must be front and center as we continue discussions that are hard and painful as we wrestle with our relationship with Israel. Each of these values must be brought to bear in our struggle. We must push ourselves to learn more and understand more, because stepping away from Israel is not acceptable. Because indifference to the complications is not acceptable. Because accepting headlines and hashtags in lieu of thoughtful reflection is not acceptable. Our community expects more from us. It is one of the characteristics of Bethel that I continue to be so proud of, that we will love Israel as we also wrestle with Israel simultaneously. We have it hung directly above our bima to remind us of this struggle. And it is a sacred struggle. So let it be a reminder, and join me in these hard discussions and reflections that we will be doing together. Shabbat Shalom.